I originally felt like I was being able to continue traveling through the kindness of strangers, but that book title was already taken. And so the cycle of kindness came about because we were on a cycling adventure. And not only did I receive kindness from people, but that I wanted to keep giving kindness. So I became much more generous and giving. I wanted to volunteer my time more often. But if it wasn't for the moments where people gave us food, water, or shelter, it would have been a much more miserable experience. And I may very well have quit much earlier on.
Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. Today we're going to flip the script and talk to a traveler who explored 7,500 miles in Europe by bicycle, but he did it in a totally different way, essentially without money. Here to share his story is Nathaniel Allenby, author of Cycle of Kindness, which recently was awarded a critically acclaimed bestseller award from the LA Tribune. Nathaniel's book chronicles the first part of a 6-year, 28,000-mile bike journey across 10 countries, and it was a heck of a lot of fun to read, almost unlike any adventure travel book I've read before. Hi, Nathaniel. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Richard. That's such a glowing statement to be introduced to. I appreciate you very much.
It's hard. Sometimes these get formulaic, and I still like them. But yeah, this is nothing like the formula. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more and learn a bit more and kind of share your story with so many people, because it is a part of a world that I don't think is super common, and it's not widely shared. And so before you started this journey, let's go back to the very start. Can you maybe talk a little bit about where you were in your life, because you weren't a typical bike tour leading up to the start of this first leg of your journey?
Yeah, I was in my early 20s. I had hit a real low point with some very serious depression, which had caused me to drop out of a politics program, and was in a place of woe, uncertainty, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, had started playing video games professionally, won the international tournament for World of Warcraft, and was getting really unhealthy and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life whatsoever. Meanwhile, my best friend had read a book called Off the Map about two young women who were traveling totally off the grid and hitchhiking around without money. And that was the source of inspiration for my best friend designing this travel that we ended up undertaking together to begin with. And it truly was a whirlwind journey. We learned how to live with no technology, or next to no technology, and basically no money. And yeah, I ended up doing this lifestyle for 6 years, as you mentioned. I've seen some really incredible places, done some really unbelievable things, and have certainly connected with my rediscovery in faith in humanity, if you will.
Seems so monumental. You weren't a bike tour, and you just kind of flippantly, almost it seems in the book, you just said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go do that." What was it like to make that decision? Was it just kind of like, "Yeah, let's go with the flow and see what happens"?
Yeah, I was definitely a Forrest Gump kind of kid. If I was going anywhere, I was running. And when I started bicycling, I was really poor to begin with. Fortunately, I had played soccer, so had pretty strong legs. But the first day, 35 miles over multiple hours was exhausting, even in the Netherlands, where it's basically totally flat. And over time, within a few months, we got to the point where we could do hundreds of miles a day, every day, back to back, while sleeping on the ground in the most unusual of places, and our bodies would recover thanks to being in our young 20s.
I think what's interesting as well is you guys weren't on some finely tuned road bikes. You were pulling a carriage. At one point, you were ghosting a second bike beside you. You were on, some budget bikes you picked up in Amsterdam, I think.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about like this setup you had? Because it was, again, there's no panniers and sleek design. You guys were super efficient in your use of money to acquire biking gear.
Yeah, my best friend essentially offered me a one-way plane ticket and a bike when we got there, as long as I would ride around with him wherever he wanted to go. It would have been smarter to get bike boxes and road bikes in the US and less expensive as well, but we didn't have that foresight. So we landed at Schiphol, walked the 10, 16 kilometers into the heart of Amsterdam, and spent a week looking for bikes. At every single shop we went into, we could not afford just about anything, and found one little basement shop that had two mountain bikes up in the rafters that had so much dust on them. I'm sure it was a blessing for this owner to get rid of them. And the only other bike we could afford was a 3-speed Dutch cruiser. So we had two mountain bikes, a 24 speed and a 27 speed, one of which, the stronger bike, was carrying a bike cart that literally held all of our possessions. The bikes were just the right sizes where my buddies and I, my best friend who started me on this, he is 6'5". They were just big enough that all of us could ride them. And when we got started, my buddy, he would carry all of the weight because he was the strongest cyclist. But riding a Dutch cruiser that was too big for me was tough with two panniers. And then riding the other mountain bike with no weight was like the day off or the easy day. So we would rotate who was riding each day in order to balance out the weight load. And whew, it was a tough start. We had no idea what we were doing. We had never done anything like this before. We couldn't read Dutch, so we were constantly getting lost. We continued to find the sign that read Doorgaand verkeer, which literally meant through traffic. But we couldn't find it on the map anywhere, so almost never went that way because we weren't trying to go to that city, or so we thought. And so we kept doing these roundabout avenues and would get lost and end up in places we weren't supposed to be or didn't want to be. And we ended up on old tank tracks and in fields and riding on dirt paths and you name it.
What I found interesting is a lot of people, when they go on a bike tour, there's certain cities they want to go to, or they want to get a certain type of distance, or they want to cross a continent. Your goal with you and your two buddies was to explore alternative ways of living. Can you talk a little
Mhm.
bit more about that goal? Because I haven't, I guess maybe everyone kind of wants to explore that on a bike tour. It's like, what's it like not to worry about emails and meetings and going to get groceries and doing all the day to day? But you were looking at kind of different ways to kind of live, kind of not just on a bike tour, but overall.
Yeah, we certainly adopted the moniker from the 60s, the drop out, tune out, and tune in kind of mentality. We were anti-capitalistic, anti-commercialism, and we only made money through any kind of work trade when we were volunteering at intentional communities, permaculture farms, or volunteer organizations, as well as busking on the streets. We would literally street perform. My best friend taught me how to juggle. And other than that, we would dumpster dive and scrounge through trash cans around food courts and take food off of trays that had yet to be emptied. We would sneak onto campgrounds late at night and get out before the camp host saw us. Or we would camp in people's backyards or just on the inside of a curve on the road so that no lights ever saw us. And we called that ninja camping, which was just literally being as sneaky as possible. And we didn't even always put up a tent. We often just laid on the ground in sleeping bags to avoid detection. And admittedly, we had a variety of run ins with the police. We were detained multiple times, but we were never doing any harm, so we were never arrested. We didn't really know what couch surfing was at the time. That didn't exist. Warm showers wasn't in our radar. We had only heard of IC.org, which is intentionalcommunity.org. And that was the majority of how we found places to stay.
What is an intentional community? When I was reading, that was one thing I kind of got a feel, but Maybe you can describe exactly what that is.
Yeah, it's a group of people who are living together with intention, who are aligned with the kind of life that they would like to live. It is often on a piece of land that everybody put into financially, sort of like a land trust. It's usually governed by, call it a board of directors, or a small body that makes collective or consensus based decision making. There are a variety of models that exist that have become more dynamic and diverse, that really are differentiated based on spiritual beliefs or daily habits, whether they want to do individual meal preparation or collective meal preparation, whether the goal is to till the land and be as self-sustainable as possible, or give back and run a sort of nonprofit organization, volunteer organization, or some kind of benevolent or altruistic thing. A lot of people take mental health patients and connect them to the land so that they're able to be outside in a safe place with loving people and get a connection with our natural world.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the dumpster diving? As
Yeah.
as I haven't ever done it, but I used to work at a supermarket. And I remember saying, "I can't believe what we're throwing out." And I remember working at McDonald's. This is when they still cook their food fresh. It would be trash bags full of food, and I remember, you'd see people out there, and they take the food that had been for sale 2 minutes before, and they just take it. I'm like, this doesn't seem like it seems like this is edible,
Hmm.
but I don't know anyone who's ever gone and done it. Looking back 25 years ago, there was a lot of good food thrown out. Is that still the case in kind of modern society?
Sadly, in most first world countries, a lot of food still gets thrown out. We have labels for just about everything, and even produce has a best
Mhm.
before date. And on that date, stores are legally obliged to toss out the food. And so, just about any given day behind any grocery store or food preparation establishment, you can find a significant portion of what they were attempting to sell that day just tossed out. And so we would go behind grocery stores primarily, but we would also hit up a variety of other places. And we would either go inside and essentially beg, ask for any food that they were going to throw away and have them give it to us directly, or go behind the store and dig through their dumpsters. Or sometimes we'd have one person doing one person doing the other, and the third person watching the bikes. And it was amazing the quantities of food that we could find. And there were times where I was traveling alone, and one specific occasion, I found 3 different dumpsters, and it felt like walking down the aisles of the grocery store. I had absolutely everything I could want. I packed so much food into my panniers because at that point, I had sold the bike, sold the cart, gotten my own solo bike, and then packed my backpack, which was like a 119-liter monster backpack. And I couldn't even cycle up the next hill. I was carrying about 80 pounds more weight than before. So I started giving out the food in broken French, saying, Joyeux Noël, Merry Christmas, gratuit, free, and just giving food out. And people are looking at me like, you seem like you need the food, not being the one giving it out. But we learned partially from that book, Off the Map, and partially from my buddy being at Evergreen University, and he and his friends there would go dumpster diving regularly. And I wish that there were better systems in place. A lot of the times there are food banks that do receive the food that would be thrown away from grocery stores. There are more organizations pairing in that way now that then give the food out to the homeless or to food banks or homeless shelters. But it certainly is an inefficient system overall, sad to say.
Can you talk a little bit about your route overall that's covered in the book? Once again, it's kind of interesting. The book, you kind of go back and forth over the same region, so it's kind of
Yeah.
again kind of the opposite of most people's bike tours, where they, it's kind of like a giant arc they might do.
Yeah.
Yours is a little bit different.
We certainly embraced the wander. We had ideas of where we wanted to go, but we started out in the Netherlands because it was flat. We eventually biked down to Belgium only to realize, one, they don't stamp passports anymore. So there was no point in trying to cross a border just for a stamp. Two, our other buddy had left his sleeping bag at the community we had just left, so we needed to go back for it. And we ended up going around the tulip fields of Lassa, which is famous, and then through Arnhem, where there was a big battle in World War II, and slept amongst bullet casings and, old military socks and some weird stuff there. And then went across Germany after the other buddy left without maps. And so we ended up playing rock, paper, scissors when we'd get to a crossroads. Whoever won got to choose which way we went. Whoever lost didn't complain. And it worked. We got about the way we needed to go in about as long as we thought it would take. We ended up going all the way across Germany to Berlin. And then our other friend, my buddy's girlfriend, she wanted to come join us. And so we ended up switching directions and heading back west across Germany, back through the Netherlands, through the north tip of France, up to London, and then from London through the Peak District, which was incredibly steep and very difficult to travel through, or excuse me, the Lake District, through Nottingham and up into Leeds and York, where we did some direct action. And then split ways. My buddy and his girlfriend went and got rained on in Scotland 16 out of 17 days in a row. My buddy then left. I traveled with the girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend, and we went straight south. It was already November. Things had gotten significantly colder than when we started in March. And I ended up in Marseille after going through Paris and Toulouse, France, by mid-December, and then went over to Toulouse. I was in Lyon in the middle of France, then later Toulouse for Christmas. I then experienced the coldest day of my life and went down to the Mediterranean again to warm back up before heading to Barcelona. And that was just the first 10 months. I ended up doing 6 years on the bike, 28,000 miles, 10 countries, 30 states. I've gone across the US and down to New Orleans. I've done down the West Coast. I've lived in the jungles in Kauai, and I've gone down into Baja Peninsula, Mexico. And so you're right, it was a very hodgepodge sort of tour. There was often not a real sense of destination, but it was way more about the journey as we went along.
One part that came through just in you talking just now, but also in reading the book, is this sense of uncertainty. You didn't know when you would eat or what you'd eat. You didn't know when you'd stay. You didn't know who you're traveling with. You start off with 3, went down to 2, went back to 3, went down to 1. And oftentimes you're navigating without maps or technology. How did you deal with all this uncertainty? Was this something you'd been used to, or is this something you had to learn to adapt to?
We definitely had to learn to adapt. We were gamers before that, so we certainly gamified our experience. We turned it into a challenge. If somebody said, "Oh, you can't do that," it was like, "Oh, yeah, we can, and we're gonna." And really, at the beginning, we were underprepared. Truly. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have a phone. We literally had a compass and a camera with rechargeable batteries and a charger. We didn't even bring a freaking bike pump to begin with. We were that naive. But we picked so much different stuff up along the road, as well as a ton more knowledge, wisdom, and call it street smarts. And as we continued to do all of these different things, we certainly improved at it. We got to the point where we could change a bike tire lickety split, super fast. Whereas early on, when we had a problem with one of our derailleurs, we didn't know how to fix it. And we spent 2 hours sitting on the side of the road, tinkering with limit screws and trying to figure that all out. We didn't bring much in the way of tools or spare goods. I had actually taken out credit card debt just to gather supplies that we needed for the trip as my contribution. And gosh, I mean, what a total learning experience, but what a wealth of knowledge that we gained throughout the process.
Your other two friends you started with ended up giving up, one fairly early. Um, in hindsight, what do you think are the most important qualities that enabled you to persevere? Is it resilience or curiosity or, trusting the process or being open to the experiences, or is there, something else entirely?
Well, there certainly is a lot of that. My first buddy left because his mom said she was dying in order to get him to return home, was lying. And that was really unfortunate and sad, but also created the opportunity to create this team of two that through this bond of brotherhood, we really were strengthened and were able to keep going, went faster, and there was a certain amount of foolhardiness to my perseverance. I certainly went through a very difficult and traumatic childhood. This caused me to gain resilience. But even when my best friend left, I didn't have the money to leave. So I didn't feel like I had an option to keep going other than to keep going. And we had made commitments. We had said we were going to go and see Stonehenge and kick the pyramids at Giza and go to all these different places. And I didn't feel done. So this feeling of being incomplete definitely got me to keep going. But I remember the first day riding alone after my buddy's then ex-girlfriend left, and I was super sad and super scared. It was really hard being alone. The first night, I remember being in the woods just by myself and hearing this like crunch, 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 crunch. And I was like, oh God, there's a giant predator. And get up and put my flashlight out the little window in the tent, and there's a bunny on dry leaves. And it was like this moment of relief and also hilarious, just, worry that was unfounded. And there was this inner desire to prove it to ourselves. Like I said, if somebody said we can't do that, we would. And it felt like something I really wanted to face, despite of how afraid of it I was. And every time I did, it just made it easier to do the next time. The next summer, we started traveling as a duo again, although a team of 6 had left before us and we were trying to catch up to them. We were able to travel really fast. We'd already done it together. We'd gained the skills. But when my buddy got his bike stolen in Cleveland, Ohio, I was like, "Oh, I'm not done." We made goals. I am goal driven. I wanted to finish the things that I set out to accomplish. And eventually I got to this point where I felt like a sail just being blown in the wind, wandering whatever direction the wind would take me. And I started to ponder how I was living and thought that because I wasn't living with intention, that this was no longer in alignment with a life with purpose, that it was a life aimless. And so I stopped after I had had this realization and wanted to live my life in such a way that I would have a more profoundly positive impact on the planet.
You talked about going solo at the end of this trip, and uh, it seemed, almost sad. And I've done some stuff in winter. It's cold, the nights are long, you're by yourself.
Mhm.
I assume there's, like everywhere, all the other cyclists or tourists you'd see have all gone home. How hard was it at that point to keep going under those circumstances?
So I admittedly have an abandonment wound from my childhood. And when my best friend left, I was devastated. And when his girlfriend left, I was really, really sad. And it was difficult to go out alone and try new things and give it a shot. And in the end, I had this feeling of like, I'm the only one that I can rely on. And I've since outgrown that and learned otherwise. But at the time, it was really painful to try to do this thing that I'd always had somebody that I could rely on, some ally, some teammate, to then just being alone and having more fear and hardly seeing anybody else on the road. We didn't run into a lot of tours as we went. We started in very cold at the end of March, went through the summer, would occasionally run into other cyclists, but we're often in the middle of nowhere. And then by the time I got into France, I would run into other cyclists, often like hardcore road bikes, doing the hard climbs and training. And oftentimes they would say like, "Oh, Le Tour de France." And I would respond, "Non, non, monsieur, Le Tour du Monde." Not the Tour of France, the Tour of the world. And they would always chuckle at that and, be very high spirited. And fortunately, France, the country I began traveling alone, is very bike culture centric. And so I did receive a lot of more positivity. And I also found that when I was alone, I would be approached by strangers much more frequently. And I would have call it gall or audacity to get outside of my comfort zone and connect with people that were total strangers to me.
The book is called Cycle of Kindness, and you talk in the book how this trip allowed you to rediscover the kindness in people. Can you maybe describe how your life or your opinion of the world was changed through these bike tours?
Yeah, I originally felt like I was being able to continue traveling through the kindness of strangers, but that book title was already taken. And so the cycle of kindness came about because we were on a cycling adventure. And not only did I receive kindness from people, but that I wanted to keep giving kindness. So I became much more generous and giving. I wanted to volunteer my time more often. But if it wasn't for the moments where people gave us food, water, or shelter, it would have been a much more miserable experience. And I may very well have quit much earlier on. But as a kid, I had a sort of disbelief of the kindness of others. I got bullied a lot. Things were bad with my older brother at home. I certainly identify as a trauma survivor. And so it was difficult to trust other people to begin with. But over time, as I kept trusting, kept asking for help, and kept receiving positive responses, it became easier to receive the help, to ask for the help, and to feel confident that if I needed help, somebody would go out of their way for me. And that just snowballed throughout the adventure to the point now where I'm like, oh, yeah, I just want to be in service to the world. I want to start an app that's like Instagram or TikTok, but instead about doing random acts of kindness for others. So I'm looking for coders. If there's any people out there that are listeners that know how to make an app, hit me up. I want to have this profoundly positive impact on the world and incentivize people to do good in the world, do kind things, and show the impact that it has on the recipient. So instead of like, look at me, ego-based media, it's look at the positive effect of a benevolent action and showing uplifting things that allow people to see good news and have a belief that there is kindness and love, compassion, empathy, and generosity that's spreading in the world. And so it's really become this conceptual movement for me that I'm just in the beginning of doing podcasts and motivational speaking, and I'm back in school to pursue a degree as a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I can help others heal their wounds as well as perform psychedelic assisted psychotherapy so that the people with the most severe PTSD or those facing impending death or the significant loss of a loved one can have real cathartic healing. So yeah, it's been a wild journey ever since.
Um, your trip had so much, there's simplicity, courage to tackle something that's hard and new, huge risk of failure, this connection with communities all around, and lots of self-discovery. But for you, like, what surprised you most about yourself in this journey?
Wow, I changed a lot. I especially got to grow through some of the psychedelic experiences that I do discuss in the book, most of which were all gifts given to me by others. I learned my own strength, courage, resilience. While I had grown up in the Boy Scouts, eventually becoming an Eagle at age 18, which, gave me a lot of survival training, it was really living that practice that allowed me to teach others, which further cemented the skills inside of me and really gain a belief in myself that says, like, hey, I'm going to be fine. I've done less with more was one of the phrases that kept coming to us. When things broke, we found ways to repair it or fix it or get others to help. And if things were really tough, we would find a way to reset, recover, regulate, and keep going. If somebody got hurt or injured, we would find a way to help them or ourselves heal. And all of these skills that were put into practice have since become a sort of foundation for life skills for me to achieve and succeed in all of the endeavors that I've attempted. I mean, I've started a circus entertainment company. It's now the highest rated company in San Diego. It's called Cirque Quirk. I think we're all a little quirky, but I probably would have never had the courage or audacity to even try a feat such as this that I had absolutely no training in, no business acumen, no idea of how to run a company, unless I had done something crazy like go on this bike tour knowing nothing, being totally underprepared and call it wet behind the ears, and just willing to take life on and be okay with failing, but fail forward. Like, learn from our mistakes, learn from the things that we mess up or do wrong, and improve. Heck, as a juggler, I've learned there's no such thing as perfection. There really is only progress. In every world record, every juggler drops eventually. It's just a matter of time. And so instead of trying to attain this belief of perfect or perfection, it's all about getting better than I was yesterday and improving my skill set. And the cycle of kindness is a lot about imparting that message onto others. And it's also about inspiring and uplifting others to lean into the discomfort. That's where growth happens. It's so important and pivotal for our own personal development to do hard things, especially ones that we don't want to do. And we totally grow throughout that.
I was wondering, for someone who's listening who isn't living a life that they like, similar to how you were, where, you were dissatisfied with the way your life was progressing, what kind of advice do you think you could give them?
Well, there's this great speech by Jim Carrey to Maharishi University. It's a commencement address that's absolutely fabulous. Highly recommend. Well worth listening to. In it, he talks about how his father was fired at a job that he hated after over a decade of dedicated commitment to this company, and that his father had had this dream that he had given up on in order to provide for his family. And they became homeless and destitute and lived out of their vehicle. And that Jim really encouraged people to take a chance doing what you love, because you can fail at doing what you don't love. So you might as well have a life where you're pursuing that dream instead of just trying to make it. And so, for everybody out there who's listening, pursue your passions. If you're unwilling to quit your day job, then at least spend 60 to 120 minutes or more every single day pursuing that dream until you reach that tipping point and things click and you're making enough money that you don't have to keep that day job, where you are self-sustainable, that you are doing this thing that you love, because people can perceive passion. And when you don't have it in business, people generally don't want to do business with you. When you do have it, those people are like, now that's a person I want to work with. There's somebody inspired. There's somebody who's obsessed with achieving a goal, with realizing a vision of what they want for themselves and the world. That person will go far. And that makes all the difference in everything that I do.
Wow, what a way to end the podcast, Nathaniel. Thank you for that great call to action and for coming on the show today and sharing your experiences, which are just so unique.
You're welcome, Richard. It's an honor to be here. Thanks to all the 10 Adventures listeners. Keep on getting out there, living the life of your dreams, doing the best you can with what you have.
If people want to find out more about you, find your circus company, read the book, where can they find you?
Yeah, The Cycle of Kindness is sold where all good books are sold. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You can also go to www.thecycleofkindness.com to read the synopsis and see the links. There's a whole link tree about The Cycle of Kindness. And then Cirque Quirk is just CirqueQuirk.com. There's also a whole link tree for that. We're on Instagram and YouTube and basically every social media platform. My other endeavor, Allenby Arts, if people want to buy my artwork and photography, they can do so at allenbyart.myshopify.com or just search in the Shopify web or app Allenby Art. And I hope to give you all the links so that everybody can have them in connection with this episode. I also have a GoFundMe, so if people want signed copies of the book, that can donate $25 or more and receive a signed copy. My full name is Nathaniel Douglas Allenby. I am easily searchable, the only one in the world that I know of with the full name. And I love connecting with other bicyclists, other inspired people, other folks that make a difference to this world. And I'm looking for constant inspired folks to partner with and make this world a better place.
Excellent. I'll put those links in the show notes. And definitely, if you're looking for a book to read for upcoming Thanksgiving and you want to just step away from the family, or just a weekend read while it's snowing outside, this is a great book, The Cycle of Kindness by Nathaniel Allenby. And thanks to all you for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Bye-bye. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.